Daniel, thanks very much for joining us here today. Green Roofs Australasia, really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
With all projects, there are always restraints by the client, or did you just have free rein on this particular project?
Well, the client for Ivy is very ambitious, a perfectionist, and looking really for a world-class entertainment precinct. So from the outset, they were going to settle for nothing less than the best in pursuing, whatever we could do to make this project, that's something that would stand out on the world stage. So we were lucky to be part of a great collaborative group of consultants, and the process was very fluid. I'm not saying that we redesigned everything, but there was certainly quite a few manifestations of what the landscape was from the initial concepts to what you see up on the rooftop and on the streetscape today.
And this particular site has George Street below, which is one of the busiest streets in Sydney.
Yeah.
And we're surrounded by buildings. What were your particular thoughts when you looked at this site?
Well, to create a place that was surprising, and that's the unique opportunity in a city like Sydney, that this is effectively a stage. It's a stage for people to come and enjoy themselves and be seen to be enjoying themselves. So that was a great opportunity. We wanted to cloak the building. It's a beautiful modern gesture in the city, and it's been awarded generously, as a contribution to urban design for Sydney, and top state awards, and I think national awards as well. So, the landscape obviously, as with any project, needed to integrate with it, but it was always key to the building that it was a partnership between the landscape and the architecture. With a name like Ivy, it sort of demanded that it was going to be like that.
So as far as noise, wind loads, sun, tell us about the space. How is it used? I know it's a nightclub, and you also have a restaurant here.
Yeah.
Do people actually use the pool, and is it recreational? Were you trying to sort of keep a relaxed atmosphere with some sort of sophistication for night?
Yeah, definitely.
Fun.
You sort of touched on a few interesting points at the beginning, because the conditions that dictate what was able to be planted in this space, obviously being in the middle of the city, there's a certain amount of ambient air temperature. There are unique sort of wind loads. There's microclimates created by buildings around this space and by this building itself. In the building adjacent to us, it's actually quite a deep atrium, which we have a big Japanese maple in, and a whole lot of plants cascading from balconies there. So we had to think about wind along the street and all the planting that spills out into the street, which is my actual favourite gesture. I think that's what makes the greatest contribution of the landscape, more than the rooftop, I think, is just what you see when you look down George Street. So we had to consider that. We had to consider winter, summer, all the obvious things, but there's a whole lot of hardscape you can see in this building, and the greatest environmental challenge is actually people. At the end of the day, when you get a building that's used like this for the kind of behaviour that goes on up here, we were very ambitious, and the client was very ambitious to create something that was absolutely spectacular and tickled the imagination of anybody who walked in. So different environments had different feels to them, when we sort of looked at Palm Springs and Brazilian modernism overlaid with a real domestic scale of things. So that's where the pots, the small potted plants come in, and the little balcony planters overlaid with the bigger trees, the big figs behind us, the palm trees, and all those sort of things. But it's how the plants interact with people that's actually the greatest challenge.
And indeed it does work, it's really stunning. I'd probably classify it as a blue roof, green roof. Can you tell us something about the build? What were some of the challenges and the constraints to the build?
Well, because as much space as possible in a venue like this needs to be used for people. So as much as we would have loved to have extensive green roofs and a great deal larger volumes of soil, the reality is that that sort of space needed to be taken up with patrons. So it was a compromise to be found between those two things. So really, we worked with the architects to make sure that we had efficiencies in soil volumes for trees. We actually found that we could get quite narrow on the planter boxes, where they're the balcony planter boxes, a little bit wider where we needed a little bit, more volume, more cascading plants that had more of an impact on the facades. But we managed to get quite a low-fi level of technology here, and quite limited widths in some planter boxes. They're 200 millimetres wide, but 600 millimetres deep. So where we were constrained laterally, at least we had the long longitude for soil depth and the depth, soil volume and the an ample depth to make sure that we could get sustainability in the plantings.
So the process 360 went through. Did you use any consultants like hydraulic engineers, horticulturalists? You all in-house, or did you also consult?
Yeah, we're all in-house with all those things, and we work with the hydro engineers to make sure that the irrigation was correctly tuned. And obviously, like anything, it's an evolutionary process. So plant establishment is the key. Certainly when a venue opens like this, things have to look good straight away. It's not like, we can start with smaller tube stock and wait for things to grow. It had to look, pretty good from day one, and that also has its challenges because those plants have come, we've tried to condition them as much as possible in the nursery before they came here, but you can't replicate what the conditions of the city are, what the conditions of concrete and reflectivity and 40-degree days and hot nor'westers. So that kind of thing, it took a lot of work with the in-house maintenance people just to make sure that, as issues arose, whether they be, pests because of humidity, because you get sort of sinks of humidity in some cases, and just making sure that the maintenance, at least in the initial stages, was really up to scratch.
Did you use a drainage cell, or as you said before, it was quite low tech?
Yeah, definitely.
What sort of soil specifications did you use?
Lightweight planter box mix, pretty low in organic matter. So it's really about nutrient dispersal as much as anything, and making sure we use some organic nutrients to top up regularly rather than sort of having a higher organic mix initially. It's been really successful. We've been fortunate, and I think the low tech. There's a lot to be said for it.
Yeah. So as far as plant specification, did you go for something that was a bit more drought tolerant, or did you mainly go for canopy cover and shade aesthetic?
It definitely had to be tough. So you can see the species, the bigger species, the Washingtonias and the figs, they're sort of naturally conditioned to high levels of exposure. And the other plants, we wanted to, fortunately, the base look and feel of the landscape is that it is wild. It is about a bit of an urban jungle, and so we wanted the plants to colonise the space and really overlay the modern robust architecture with something that was a little bit more like a landscape that had been colonised. So that's been beneficial because it's not high maintenance. That the landscape's allowed to evolve on its own merits.
I noticed behind you there's plants growing on a separate level. Can you tell me something about that?
Yeah, so there's an on-site nursery. That's as much to do with the detail planting. We talked about having pots, and there's lots of pots throughout the space. There's some up here on the rooftop, on the pool, but throughout the space there's quite a lot of pots. And there's different conditions. There's shadier conditions and undercrofts and areas which get more exposed to sun. So by having an on-site nursery, we can replicate those conditions much more accurately, and it's natural to replenish a garden with new plantings, and we have to be conscious of that ourselves, and we also obviously need our clients to understand that. It's one of the fundamental things, I think, from the outset, that we made that clear with the client, and they understood. They have a good horticultural understanding. So, it wasn't a message which we had to drive home and So that became part of the development of the ideas from the outset.
Okay, I think sometimes we can be a bit idealistic and want the whole roof covered in vegetation, and I think that's why it's important to actually, look at the site and get as much vegetation as we can possibly get, given the circumstances. Would you say that given more scope and control with the job, you would have added more vegetation, or
Not necessarily. I think that's the point. Is that where we get an opportunity, we take an opportunity, and I think our job is to be as creative as possible with what we've got. And sometimes, the high tech, the structurally engineered rooftops or green walls that require high maintenance just are preclusive to a lot of clients. So, the way that we can green cities, the way that we can, reduce all the environmental factors the issues that we need to reduce, and the way that we can improve social sustainability by having better rooftop spaces and cities that are more habitable. And, we're on a rooftop. You look across the city for an aerial view, there's not many people on rooftops in Sydney. So we make the best of what we've got. We've got climbers like Salandra cascading over tiny little, in narrow little planters, but they have an incredible amount of impact because, they throw up in long tendrils, and they have the same sort of visual impact that, maybe something else might have required more soil volume to attain that kind of thing. So, as ever, it's problem solving. We've had experience where we've been fortunate to have, an extensive green roof at M Central over in Ultimo, which has, probably started us off in the green roof and green infrastructure realm. And that doesn't always happen. It happens on that kind of scale infrequently. But, we're working on small projects, inner city projects on tiny little balconies and putting pots on them. And the impact that has on people's lives can be as equally powerful as an extensive green roof or a 24 high metre green wall. So, everything that we do has to fit what's presented to us. We can obviously present as much of a case as we can, but slowly catchy monkey, as much as possible. And there's no harm in going back to those low-tech, lo-fi kind of technologies and embracing that, because they are accessible, and that is, if we can spread the message by making things happen in more circumstances, then we're going to have better chances to do more ambitious projects down the track.
Yeah. As you know, in Australia, water is a scarce commodity, and I was talking to Patrick Lonk about Central Park. He said that tanks were put under that project to collect the water that they could use for irrigation. Have you done similar here?
Well, there's water tanks down below. You can see there's a fair bit of concrete, a fair bit of thermal insulation naturally in this building. So there's a good amount of concrete between all the planters. Plus drainage cell provides further insulation to insulate the planters. So we don't tend to get as much drying out as you might normally with a thinner planter profile. That was something we built in obviously early to try to minimise water use and water loss. But how long ago was it that we were building desalination plants for fear of not being able to have water through the city, and then now we can't get rid of the we can't get rid of the rain. So we always have to have the backup system, of course. It's just about being able to ride the droughts and flooding rains that we get in Australia. So when you need it, if there's going to be a 40-degree day, you've got it. And otherwise, once the plants are established and they're sort of, they've adapted, then it's about using water as you need it rather than having it come on twice a week necessarily.
I mean, obviously one of the benefits for this project has been the use of the amenity space in high-rise development in the city. Have you found any new habitats being formed, or an increase in bird life, or
plenty of bird life up on Ivy? Different kind of bird life, I think.
Okay.
I think human bird life, but look, every project that we've done green roofs for, no matter how big or small, the day the soil went down at M Central, there was birds on the roof looking for worms, and up there now there's bees, there's wasp nests, and there's a whole ecosystem up there hanging on to leaves of agaves, and so besides the fact that there's humans, pets as well, occupying the space, so it's that kind of environment definitely. Bird life, definitely. Insect life, of course. So yeah, definitely. And what we're sort of
on the contribution to the environment.
Yeah. So, I mean, what really excites our practice is the social sustainability side of things. I think there's no question that the environmental benefits are well documented, and as soon as you put a plant anywhere, there's an aphid, there's a ladybug, there's an insect, there's a microorganism that's starting a new ecosystem. But it's really that human habitat that's most vital. And now not only we're seeing residential spaces, entertainment spaces, and now we're working on quite a number of healing gardens for mental health and cancer centres in the city, where rooftop landscapes are being utilised for healing. So we're seeing that social sustainability benefit really extend into all realms, and that's incredibly exciting for us.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. In hindsight, any lessons learned from this particular project? Positives that you would carry on to the next project?
Yeah, it's
really an evolving process.
It is an evolving process, and you learn new things about different plant species all the time, and how fragile or how robust they can be in different situations, because a lot of these plants are relatively untested, at least in our neck of the woods. We have great precedent images of fantastic green roofs from all over the world, New York, Germany, Canada, to name but a few, in France, green walls in France, and really we're just touching a fountain of knowledge here about really what works and what doesn't in Australia, because our conditions are so unique. So we've learned things about different species, and thankfully the majority of plants are still happy here.
Yeah, they look healthy.
Yeah. So we haven't really had too much changeover. We used one plant, Amanda Villa, for some of the planter boxes, the smaller planter boxes, which were actually steel. They're more balcony planters, and they just didn't really handle the conditions so well. So we replaced them with a native climber, Hibertia scandens, and they haven't taken a backward step. So, funnily enough, an exotic species replaced by a native species, and it's thrived. Not surprising. And I guess as we become more comfortable with our own plant species, and we can generate a unique Australian palette that works here, that's only going to take a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of, or some faith from our clients, some of our own research, which is vital that we sort of have Green Roofs Australasia assisting, doing trials of species, of our own species that are going to be suitable for the kind of projects that are right for our very, very diverse, even in this country, situations.
Yeah. I was just talking to Rebecca, the publicist for Ivy, and it's possible that we can have the reception for the World Green Infrastructure Congress in 2014 up here. So that would be a fantastic event to hold up here. I'd really like to appreciate thank you for your time today. It's been great.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. It's a privilege to be part of what you guys are doing, and to be asked to talk a little bit about what we're doing. So, thank you.
So keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.